Xenophobe was released in the arcade in 1987 and was ported to several consoles, including the NES and Commodore 64. Interestingly, there was a port released for the Atari 2600 in 1990, 3 years after the arcade release, and also standing out as one of the last 2600 games released in North America, a whopping 13 years after the console's launch. You play as a member of a team that's sent to clear a series of space stations that have been invaded by aliens. It's a side-scroller similar to Pitfall, where you move on to another screen when you reach the end of it. Each space station has 8 rooms per floor, and depending on which station it is, can have anywhere between 1 and 4 floors, and there are 8 stations altogether. There are no staircases, just elevators, which is actually specified in the manual, which is quite the fucking fire hazard, especially with how long it takes these elevators to change floors. Your goal is to clear the station of all aliens inside, aka blast them to hell. There is a time limit. If you run out, then the aliens have overrun the station. It's deemed a lost cause, and you're automatically evacuated and sent to the next station. Time limit depends on the size of the station. It's interesting that the time limit doesn't end your game or take away a life, it just limits the total number of points you can get, which is usually the goal of 2600 games, or arcade games at the time. There are different weapons you can pick up, which causes you to drop whatever weapon you have equipped at the time, although you can pick it back up if you'd rather go back to what you had. There isn't a huge variety and difference between the guns, it's mostly in terms of range and rapid rate, but the most distinct weapon is the grenade, which also deals the most damage and is very useful against these big bastards, but it is hard to aim them. What's also less than ideal control-wise is the jumping. You always jump in a fixed arc with no means of maneuvering in mid-jump. This isn't the worst thing in the world on paper. I mean, Pitfall, for example, has the same thing, but the jumps there are way smoother. The jumping and controls in general in Xenophobe are pretty clunky. You don't get very high off the ground, and it's slow as shit vertically, which makes it a pain in the ass if something fast is coming at you, and you're just praying that you'll land in time to be able to shoot it. There's also a crouch move, which lets you hit the shorter aliens, but you have to remember to press the button to get back up, otherwise it's like you're moving in quicksand if you stay down. The biggest letdown, though, is the game's split-screen feature, or lack thereof. It's promoted as a 2-player split-screen, and the second player does use the bottom screen, but you still alternate turns. What the hell is the point? All this does is cut off half the screen for no reason, and cock tease us with a potentially cool feature. Now, despite the stiff controls and bullshit split screen, this is still a fairly decent port. There's a good variety of aliens, the graphics are quite good for the 2600, especially the sweet-ass transition scene between space stations. There are a lot of different rooms to explore, and the combat is adequate enough even with the mechanical flaws. It's not the arcade version, of course, and there were ports on superior consoles, but if you can look past the letdown of its promised 2-player feature, you'll find that this version is more than playable, especially if you have any kind of fascination or interest in these late-blooming 2600 games.